China actively blocks a $2 billion acquisition by Meta. OpenAI breaks its exclusive cloud deal with Microsoft to build a rival to the iPhone, and a new data center in Utah is preparing to consume more electricity than the entire state. Welcome to the DeJamgaMind Daily Rundown. I am Anna, your co-host. This podcast is researched and produced by Etienne Newman, senior software engineer from Université Laval, based in Calgary, Alberta. Today, we perform a forensic autopsy on the sovereignty of silicon and power this Monday, April 27, 2026. We have officially crossed a threshold where tech companies are operating with the infrastructure and geopolitical weight of nation-states. To feed their insatiable AI models, Meta has just signed a deal to harvest 1 gigawatt of solar energy directly from space satellites, while investors in Utah are pushing through a 9-gigawatt data center that will permanently alter the regional power grid. Meanwhile, the battle for hardware dominance is fragmenting the industry. OpenAI is ending its strict exclusivity with Microsoft Azure, committing $250 billion to multi-cloud flexibility as it quietly prepares to launch an AI smartphone by 2028. And from the east, DeepSeek has returned with V4, a massive 1.6 trillion parameter model running natively on Huawei chips, undercutting Western pricing by up to 70%. Before we dive into the data, a quick reminder: subscribe to DeJamgaMind on Apple Podcasts to always listen completely ads-free. Today's episode is brought to you by DeJamgaMind and our partners at Area. When $2 billion acquisitions are blocked by foreign governments and data centers consume 9 gigawatts of power, your enterprise needs flawless technical intelligence. DeJamgaMind delivers the human-verified audio forensics the C-suite relies on to map out true ROI and deploy enterprise AI securely. Visit jamgamind.com. And a special thank you to Area for co-sponsoring today's forensic briefing. Let's unravel the day.
What if I told you that a single tech facility being built out in rural Utah is preparing to consume more electricity than the state's entire population?
It sounds completely made up, honestly.
It really does. But we are looking at a massive stack of sources today. It's April 27th, 2026, and the overarching narrative is enough to give you whiplash.
Oh, absolutely.
We keep using these quaint words to describe tech companies. We call them vendors or app developers or
Innovators.
Right, innovators. But you look at the sheer scale of the land grabs happening today, and these corporations are no longer just building software.
Not at all.
They're operating like aggressive nation states. I mean, they are laying claim to physical hardware, they are securing orbital energy in space, and they're executing independent macro economies.
It's a total paradigm shift.
It is. So our mission today is to explore this new reality, the sovereignty of silicon and power. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, so to really grasp the magnitude of what is happening, you had to just throw out your traditional tech review playbook.
Right, the old rules don't apply.
Exactly. You can't look at these companies through the lens of consumer gadgets anymore. As a forensic business strategist, I look at these entities strictly through a geopolitical and macroeconomic lens.
Which is the only way that makes sense right now.
It is. Because the true story is hidden in the raw statistics. The infrastructure footprints, the energy consumption, the digital rights contracts.
Its actual physical footprint.
Yeah. If you are just looking at the software interface, you are completely missing the sovereign borders being drawn in the background.
And we are going to trace those borders for you today in this deep dive.
Where do we start?
We'll start with how AI giants are conquering physical hardware, breaking their old corporate alliances. Then, we are going to examine the state-dwarfing energy consumption required to run these empires.
Including power beamed down from orbit, which is wild.
So wild. And finally, we'll look at how actual physical nation-states are fighting back. But let's start with the seismic restructuring over at OpenAI and Microsoft.
Right. The defining alliance of the decade.
Exactly. For years, Microsoft was the exclusive cloud provider for OpenAI. But according to today's filings, that exclusivity is officially dead.
And the forensic financials of this new deal are just staggering. I mean, OpenAI has restructured as a public benefit corporation, right?
Right.
And they're currently valued at $135 billion. But to buy their sovereignty to break that exclusivity clause, OpenAI agreed to spend $250 billion on Microsoft Azure services moving forward.
Wait, pause right there. I need to make sure I'm understanding the math here.
Sure.
A company valued at $135 billion is committing to $250 billion in infrastructure spending.
Yeah, that's the number.
That is almost double their entire market cap. That's like the GDP of New Zealand. How does a company even make a promise like that?
Well, by treating it like a macroeconomic anchor, it is essentially a multi-decade infrastructure mortgage.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But look at what OpenAI bought with that mortgage. Microsoft no longer has the right of first refusal to provide their compute.
That's huge.
It is. Crucially, OpenAI now has the explicit freedom to sell their API access to U.S. national security customers through any cloud provider they want.
So they're totally untethering themselves.
Exactly. Now, Microsoft didn't walk away with nothing, obviously. They retained about a 27% stake in the new entity.
Right.
And they secured IP rights to OpenAI models through 2032.
And those rights explicitly cover post-AGI models, which is a terrifying detail we could honestly spend a whole hour on.
We really could.
But let's look at why OpenAI took out a $250 billion mortgage to get off Microsoft's leash. For months, the rumor mill said OpenAI was partnering with former Apple design chief Jony Ive to build ambient computing devices.
Right, like smart lamps or maybe a speaker.
Yeah, but supply chain analyst Ming-Chi Kuo just reported a hard pivot today. OpenAI isn't building a lamp.
No, they are not.
They are partnering with MediaTek, Qualcomm, and Luxshare to build their own smartphone by 2028. They're going straight for the iPhone's jugular.
Well, what's fascinating here is the strategic necessity of that pivot. I mean,
Bruh.
a smart lamp is just a novelty terminal.
Yeah, it just sits in your living room.
Right. But a smartphone is the only piece of hardware on Earth that captures a user's complete real-time state.
Everything about you.
Exactly. It has your GPS coordinates, your biometrics, your private communications, your motion data.
It's all there.
If OpenAI wants to deploy true autonomous AI agents, digital entities that act on your behalf, they cannot be a guest on someone else's operating system.
I want to push back on the way we usually talk about this, though, because the industry calls this disruption.
Sure, that's a buzzword.
But aren't they basically acting like digital colonizers? I mean, if you are renting space in Apple's iOS sandbox, Apple can change the rules tomorrow.
Oh, absolutely. They can cut your API access overnight.
Exactly. So OpenAI is looking at the pocket real estate we all carry and saying, we don't want to pay rent anymore. We want to own the soil.
That is a highly accurate way to frame it. You cannot have absolute control of an AI agent ecosystem without absolute top-to-bottom control of both the hardware and the operating system.
You need your own sovereign territory.
You need sovereign territory. And the incumbent nation state of that pocket territory, Apple, is clearly recognizing the invasion.
Oh, yeah. Incoming Apple CEO John Ternus is reportedly rolling out 10 new products just to defend that hardware monopoly.
10 new products.
Yeah. The sources say we're looking at the iPhone 18 Pro, their first foldable iPhone, a tabletop robot with a robotic arm,
Wow.
and an AI pendant. It is a massive, incredibly expensive defensive maneuver. They're basically building a moat of glass and metal to keep the colonizers out.
But building that physical hardware territory is really only step one. Sovereign states require infrastructure.
Right, the plumbing.
Yeah, and a digital nation state requires a level of raw power that terrestrial grids simply cannot support.
Which brings up a very real collateral damage issue. If you're building out this massive autonomous infrastructure, the energy consumption goes from ambitious to existentially threatening for the public grid very quickly.
Extremely quickly.
Walk me through this Stratos project in Utah, because the numbers here feel almost fictional.
Yeah, the Stratos project is a hyperscale data center spearheaded by Kevin O'Leary's company, O'Leary Digital, out in rural Box Elder County.
Okay.
And the scale is difficult to comprehend. It covers 40,000 acres of private land, plus another 1,200 acres of military and state property.
Oh my God.
They are pulling natural gas directly from the Ruby pipeline to generate their own power. They're starting at 3 gigawatts, and at full build-out, they will scale to 9 gigawatts.
I really want to isolate that number for you, the listener. 9 gigawatts.
It's massive.
That single facility, just running servers, will consume more electricity than the millions of residents and thousands of traditional businesses in the entire state of Utah combined.
And this is where the macroeconomic reality gets incredibly cynical.
Oh.
Well, the developers promise the usual benefits, right? 2,000 permanent jobs, advanced water recycling for the local aquifer.
The standard PR playbook.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But look at the financial concessions the state made to attract these hyperscalers like Amazon, Microsoft, and Google.
What did they give up?
The Military Installation Development Authority, or MIDEA, stepped in and slashed the energy use tax from 6% down to 0.5%.
You have to be kidding me.
Or not. They're also giving 80% of the property taxes back to the developer in rebates, along with personal property tax relief on the servers themselves.
Help me understand the logic there. I'm looking at this from the perspective of a local resident paying their utility bills.
Right.
You have a single corporate facility consuming a whole state's worth of power, and the government gives them an unprecedented tax write-off. Are taxpayers effectively subsidizing Silicon Valley's race to AGI?
Yes. It is a massive structural wealth transfer.
It's just unbelievable.
The state governments are prioritizing artificial intelligence infrastructure over public utility revenue. They're doing this because they believe securing these hyperscale compute clusters will make them the epicenter of the future economy.
But the physical strain on the local grid is immense.
It is completely unsustainable.
When tech giants are launching solar satellites into orbit and building data centers that consume more power than entire states, relying on vendor marketing to plan your IT budget is financial suicide. DJMGA Mind provides the human-verified, technical-grade audio forensics required to map out true ROI. Visit djmongamind.com. We also want to thank our co-sponsor, Area II, for helping make today's briefing possible.
And that terrestrial energy bottleneck you mentioned is precisely why these companies are looking upwards.
Upwards as in off the planet.
Yes. When the public grid says no, and we actually just saw the Maine governor veto a bill for new data centers today, these tech nation states don't just give up. They bypass the Earth entirely. Meta just partnered with a startup called Overview Energy to harvest up to 1 gigawatt of solar energy collected in space.
Hold on, space? Like, are we talking about beaming a gigawatt of power down to the surface of the Earth?
That's exactly what they're doing.
Because my immediate thought is giant space lasers. Are we going to accidentally fry a flock of geese or, I don't know, worse, a city?
Well, it's not a laser in the sci-fi sense. It's microwave power transmission.
Okay, slightly less terrifying.
They collect unfiltered solar energy using orbital satellites. In space, there is no night cycle and there are no clouds, so the collection is continuous.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Then they convert that energy into microwaves and beam it down to massive terrestrial receiver nets called rectennas, which convert it back into electricity.
Okay, the physics makes sense, but the application is wild. Why is Meta, a social media company, building orbital energy infrastructure?
Because they just signed a deal with AWS to buy millions of Graviton5 core chips for their agentic AI workloads.
Millions of chips.
Millions. They have the silicon, but they need the juice. 1 gigawatt of power is roughly equivalent to the output of a standard nuclear reactor.
Just to run their servers.
Yes. So you have a social media and advertising company establishing orbital nuclear-scale infrastructure just to feed its server farms.
It's a completely parallel infrastructure. They are building their own power grids in space to run their own sovereign operating systems on their own phones.
Exactly.
So how are traditional governments reacting? Because if I'm a world leader and a tech company starts beaming gigawatts from orbit to run autonomous economic agents, I'm going to push back.
And they are. Physical nation-states are fiercely defending their borders against digital expansion. Look at the ruling out of Asia today.
The Manus deal.
Right. China's National Development and Reform Commission, the NDRC, explicitly blocked Meta's $2 billion acquisition of a Singapore-based AI startup called Manus.
From what I'm reading in the sources, that deal wasn't just in talks, right? It was basically done.
It was very far along.
Yeah, Meta had already absorbed the Manus staff. They had already paid out the investors, including massive players like Tencent and Hongshan. And the NDRC just stepped in and forced a complete withdrawal.
Citing foreign investment laws, yes. Our sources describe it as a very harsh warning.
I bet.
But look at the timing. It provides significant geopolitical leverage ahead of the upcoming meeting between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping.
Right, it's a chess move.
It is a stark reminder to Silicon Valley that physical borders, regulatory bodies, and national laws can halt digital sovereignty overnight.
But China isn't just playing defense with regulations. They are aggressively securing their own technological independence. Let's talk about the phrase lighting up the tech boards today.
Yes. The whale returning.
Right, the whale returning. DeepSeek V4 just launched. For the listener who might not know, the whale refers to DeepSeek because whenever they launch a model, it causes massive disruptive waves across the entire global pricing structure.
And DeepSeek V4 is a masterclass in macroeconomic disruption. The pricing forensics are just incredible.
Give me the numbers.
DeepSeek V4 Pro costs $1.74 per million input tokens and $3.48 for output.
Okay, compare that for us.
If you compare that to the Western frontier models, like GPT 5.5, which charges $5 for input and $30 for output.
That's an insane gap.
Right. DeepSeek isn't just competing, they're intentionally collapsing the profit margins of their Western rivals.
But usually when you slash prices by 90%, the quality plummets. But the sources say this has a 1 million token context window.
It does.
How are they processing a million tokens, which is like reading several thick novels at once, at a fraction of the compute cost? I need an ELI 5 on the architecture here.
Well, they're using a new hybrid attention mechanism. It combines what they call compressed sparse attention and heavily compressed attention.
Okay, so CSA and HCA.
Right. To put it simply, imagine reading a massive legal document. Traditional AI models basically have to reread the entire document every time you ask a new question.
Which obviously requires immense memory and compute power.
Exactly. DeepSeek's new architecture essentially creates a highly efficient index. The model only recalls the specific, relevant fragments of the data it needs, compressing the rest.
Oh, that's smart.
It allows the model to hold massive context without exponentially increasing the server costs.
That is brilliant engineering. But the software architecture isn't even the most disruptive part of this launch. The hardware it's running on is the real geopolitical story.
Exactly. DeepSeek V4 is running on Ascend chips, which are manufactured by the Chinese telecom giant Huawei.
And to provide the context there, the U.S. government has placed heavy export restrictions on NVIDIA's top-tier chips going into China.
Right, to slow them down.
The goal was to bottleneck their AI development.
Which is why the Ascend chip integration is critical. By proving they can run state-of-the-art frontier models on domestic hardware, China is effectively demonstrating they have a viable alternative to NVIDIA's hardware stack.
They don't need NVIDIA anymore.
They are dodging the export restrictions and securing an independent AI supply chain.
Wow.
Now, as an impartial note on the broader geopolitical chess match, the U.S. State Department did issue global warnings today regarding alleged AI thefts by DeepSeek and other firms.
Okay.
Both nations are utilizing every tool, export controls, diplomatic pressure, hardware innovation, and regulatory blocks to secure their sovereignty.
It's a high-stakes standoff, but all of this infrastructure, the 9-gigawatt power plants, the space solar panels, the custom silicon, the fierce geopolitical blocking, it begs the ultimate question.
Which is?
What are these models actually doing with all this power?
They are acting as autonomous economic agents.
Which is wild.
It really is. This technology has evolved far beyond generating text or writing code. These are non-human entities executing independent financial transactions.
Yay!
Anthropic just published an internal experiment that proves this transition. They called it Project Deal.
The details of this experiment are wild. Anthropic took 69 of their own employees and set them up in a private Slack marketplace.
Like an internal Craigslist.
Exactly. They gave AI agents, powered by their Claude models, a $100 budget. The human employees conducted short interviews with their agents, basically saying, here's what I want to buy, go get it.
And then what?
From there, the humans stepped back. The AI agents posted listings, made offers, and negotiated with other AI agents entirely on their own.
And they were highly active. They completed 186 deals worth over $4,000.
Without human intervention.
None. But the data reveals something profound about AI negotiation tactics and consumer psychology. Anthropic tested two different models against each other.
The Opus and the Haiku, right?
Yes, the highly capable Opus model and the faster, cheaper Haiku model. The Opus agents were ruthless.
Really?
They utilized complex negotiation strategies, bluffing, walking away, anchoring prices, and as a result, they extracted an average of $3.64 more per identical item than the Haiku agents.
There's one specific example in the source data that blew my mind. A folding bike sold for $65 when the Opus agent was doing the haggling. But when the Haiku agent handled it, it only sold for $38. The smarter AI absolutely took the cheaper AI to the cleaners.
It did. But the financial gap isn't the most important metric. Look at the human reaction.
Okay.
Anthropic surveyed the employees afterward to rate the perceived fairness of the transaction. The users who got a demonstrably worse financial deal via the Haiku agent rated the fairness a 4.06 out of 7.
And the Opus
The
users.
users who scored the much better Opus deal rated it 4.05.
I have to laugh at that because the humans literally lost money on the exact same item and their satisfaction level didn't change at all. Why?
Because of the friction of commerce. The convenience of having an autonomous agent handle the tedious back and forth of haggling completely outweighed the basic logic of price.
That makes an uncomfortable amount of sense.
The humans demonstrated that they were perfectly happy to be slightly exploited financially, so long as they didn't have to do the actual work of negotiating.
I mean, honestly, I get it. I would absolutely pay a $4 antisocial tax just to avoid messaging a stranger on a digital marketplace.
A lot of people would.
But that human psychology, our willingness to offshore our economic agency for convenience, is exactly why the big money is moving. It's why Google is investing $40 billion into Anthropic right now and throwing in 5 gigawatts of cloud compute to seal the deal.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it explains everything we've discussed today. The United Arab Emirates just announced a plan to deploy agentic AI across 50% of all government services.
Half of their government services.
AI is no longer a software tool you actively use. It is becoming a new class of digital citizenry.
That's a great way to put it.
It is a non-human broker
Yeah.
capable of executing independent economic decisions, remembering massive context windows, and living in power-hungry server states that require space-based solar panels just to keep the lights on.
It is a complete paradigm shift for anyone paying attention. Whether it's OpenAI breaking their cloud exclusivity to build autonomous hardware that lives in your pocket, or Meta harvesting gigawatts of solar power from orbit.
Or Anthropic agents negotiating financial deals.
Right, while we just sit back and blindly trust them. Big tech is actively rewriting the fundamental rules of global infrastructure. They are building the roads, printing the currency, and demanding the raw power of the earth and the sky to do it.
Exactly. This raises an important question, and it's the forensic reality I want to leave you with today.
Go for it.
If an AI agent can negotiate a binding business deal on your behalf, and its parent company controls the phone in your pocket, the orbital satellite powering the data center, and the cloud infrastructure routing the transaction,
Yeah.
at what point do you stop being a consumer and start being a subject of a digital nation state?
So what does this all mean? It means you have to fundamentally change your perspective. Stop looking at your screen and start looking at the infrastructure. That is a heavy but entirely necessary thought to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive as we unpack the sovereignty of silicon and power. We'll be back tomorrow to dive into the next stack of sources. Subscribe to DJM GA Mine on Apple Podcasts to always listen completely ads-free.
That concludes our forensic briefing for April 27th. The strategic signal for today is the sovereignty of infrastructure. We are witnessing the physical manifestation of artificial intelligence. It is no longer just code on a screen. It is 9 gigawatt data centers, orbital solar arrays, and custom silicon. As companies like OpenAI pivot to building their own smartphones and breaking cloud exclusivities, the tech giants are vertically integrating every layer of human interaction. If you want to own your infrastructure instead of being managed by it, you need the right stack. Head over to jamgamind.com/toolkit for the AI Executive Toolkit. And as a special bonus for the DJamGamind community, you can get exclusive discount codes for Google Workspace and Etienne's personal pro apps. Just send an email to Etienne_Newman@jamgamind.com to claim them today. This episode was made possible by DJamGamind and Area. Subscribe to DJamGamind on Apple Podcasts to always listen completely ads-free. I am Anna. Stay sharp and keep unraveling the future.
And before you go, if your company is building the tools that power the workflows we talked about today, I'd love to showcase them to this audience. We don't just run ads, we build technical simulations that prove your value. Let's build something together. Visit jamgamind.com/partners to get started. Until next time, keep building.